focus, as requested, on the issue of the Tzuras HaPesach, of the using overhead wire in order to make an Eruv. And I assume you all have the Marei Mekomos. These are, they'll go in somewhat in the order. And the first issue was one which was brought up in the 19th century when telegraph wires began to be put up all over the world, which is whether you can use something which is not meant for Tzuras HaPesach as a Tzuras HaPesach. In other words, it's meant to hold the wires. It's not meant to have to transport the electric signal. It's not meant to serve as a Pesach. So one of the early Eruvin in America was put up in St. Louis around the turn of the 20th century by Rabbi Zechariah Epstein, who wrote Kuntras here, took Tikva Zechariah. And it's a very, very brilliant Kuntras, and you can find it in Hebrew books if you're interested in reading it. It's not that long. And he speaks here about this issue of the telegraph poles, using them as a Tzuras HaPesach. And he points out a very simple and basic thing, which is the telegraph poles are meant to be psachim. In other words, the point of putting them high up is in order that you should be able to go underneath them and go from side to side. One of the famous questions in Hilchos Eruvin for which there's no good answer is why we don't put up mezuzahs on the Tzuras HaPesach. The assumption is that we don't put them up because they'll be vandalized. But if you were able to put up a mezuzah, these psachim are psachim which require mezuzahs. I don't know, maybe there's somewhere there's somebody who's machmir. It does put up mezuzahs on the Tzuras HaPesach. I've never seen it. But they are considered to be psachim. So that basically was accepted for all time, but since the 19th century, as being the assumption that their telegraph poles are, you can use them as Tzuras HaPesach. As we know, most poskim, the overwhelming majority of poskim, hold that you can't have a Tzuras HaPesach minatzad. You can't have a Tzuras, in order to have a Tzuras HaPesach, the wire has to go directly over the top of the pole. It can't go on the side of the pole. So telegraph poles, very often, telephone poles as well, wire goes over the side on a crossbar or on some sort of other beam which comes out. So there was one posting, the Torah's Chesed, Lublin, who wanted to say that even still it's the Tzuras HaPesach. Because even though it's on the side, but because it's attached, with nails and whatever else, so it is considered Tzuras HaPesach Agabah. Nobody passes like the Torah's Chesed.
So in his opinion is basically, since it's attached, it's good enough?
Yes. Yes. But nobody passes like the Torah's Chesed, and even he would only say it B'shas Nefchad Gadol, but as I said, none of the posts can pass like the Torah's Chesed. It's basically something which is not taken into account. But what does frequently happen, almost in every Eruv, is that you don't have, the electric company, they're anti-Semites, of course, they don't put every wire directly over the top of a pole. I don't know why, because the Kollel should do it for us. But they don't. So very often, almost always, you're going to have the wire on the side of a pole. Right? And you're going to need to put, so that's, like we said, except to go to Torah's Chesed, that's Tzuras HaPesach. It's no good. So what was done for many years, in America especially, was they put up a plank, or a 2x4, something that next to the telephone pole, and we have a principle: as long as you have something which is 10 fucking high, we say Gudasek Mechitzta. Gudasek Mechitzta means that suppose there's an imaginary line which goes up from the end of that 10 tefach height all the way up to Shamayim. So in this case, if you have what we call a lechi down here, it goes all the way up to the wire, that in that imaginary Gudasek line which starts at the top of the post and continues up. The thing is like this. What happens, and again, electric company, anti-Semites, they let electric poles become crooked. Now, if you go down the street, you will see, you never notice this, that some of them are at crazy angles, some of them are being held together by being by another pole which is holding them in place. So as long as they're not going to fall down, the electric company doesn't usually care. And therefore, very often, almost a lot of poles, if not most of them, they're on an angle, which means that the wire is over there, either on this side or that side of the angle. Stop me if my drawings aren't clear. So now, the question is, where do you put the lechi? So in most Eruvin in America, the way they're built before the 1990s, let's say, they were built, same thing, with the lechi down here. The problem is the Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish, you take a look at the second Marei Mekomos. He says, "Ukshekani balachson tzarich sheyeh kon elyon kinegdon klapei malo mata shel olam, v'lo k'malo mata shel hen, dainu balachson." He says the Passaic goes like this. It doesn't go along the line of the angle of the lechi. It goes perpendicular to the ground from the top of the lechi. So therefore, if you have a pole like this, and you have, again, it's on an angle, and you have a short lechi, it's never going to be underneath the telephone pole, and the Eruv is puzzle. I was once checking an Eruv, and I found many l'chaim like this, and I didn't want to go myself. I was perhaps too big a coward, but I sent somebody to the rabbi with a long white beard who shall remain nameless. Now I'm getting that myself, well, a short white beard. But I to ask him on what basis he built an Eruv like this. So he said he'll get back to me, but that's the way Passaic works. It goes along the line of the angle. So I'm still waiting. He's in the oil mammoths already, but I'm still waiting for an answer many years later. There is no one who argues on this Chazon Ish. So this creates a problem in almost every single suburban Eruv which is built early in America, because they were all built with short l'chayim. And they're still being built this way today.
Why would it be that way, that it goes straight up? I'm saying, just logically, you just think of it as continuing the direction that it was going.
Because that's not the way Passaic works. In other words, this is although it looks like a curved wall, it's just a wall. Right? It doesn't matter the fact that it's an angle. And then Passaic goes straight up because that's where the wall ends. So even if you have a curved wall, it's still a wall which halachically, at that point, is considered to be up and down. Okay, where it ends, that's where it goes straight up. Yes?
Why can't you put the lechi just directly underneath the cord? Why does it have to be attached to
You can, but it's very expensive.
The pole move, and the pole might move.
So you change it next week?
You mean to go all the way up, right?
And then every Friday you go and you move the lechi directly underneath.
So things like this. Once
You got a job.
when I moved to a certain neighborhood, so I said to the Rav, I would like to look at your Eruv. So he said, "B'kavod gadol." So sometimes I have a mazel for that. Usually the first pole I check is no good. So the first pole I checked was one in which the person who checked the Eruv every week put plank. The pole kept on bending more and more and more, and it kept nailing plank after plank after plank on top of each other, and it still wasn't underneath the wire. So this is a very difficult thing to do if you don't have the proper tools, which are, if you have a little plumb line, or Rabbi Shotkin here in Passaic he has one short lechi, and he uses some sort of optical instrument, which is very fancy. It costs $1,000 to show that, to make sure every week that it's directly underneath the wire overhead. But it's very difficult to tell otherwise. And if there is a question, as you know, do we follow the naked eye, or do we follow precise measurements? Same halacha issue applies to taloyim, a bunch of other things. But here, it's very hard to tell because it's high up. So even if you follow the naked eye, in other circumstances, here the naked eye is fooled by the distances. It's very hard to tell. So unless somebody has tremendous yiras shamayim, and it has tremendous time every week, and doesn't fall into a habit, the checker is not going to deal with this properly. And most of the times, the Eruvin out of town, so that's not the way about Passaic, but let's say you live out of town in a place where, the Rabbanim there for 4 years at a time. So the first 2 years, the Rabbanim were too busy to get to the Eruv. The last 2 years, the Rabbanim are already looking for a new job. So therefore, if the Eruv can go 20, 30 years without anybody actually paying serious attention to it, except the checker. And therefore, you're not actually relying on the Rav, you're relying on the checker. The other thing to state in that regard is, if I build an Eruv, and I give a hechsher to an Eruv, that's only for the first Shabbos. Unless they bring me in afterwards. Until now, no Eruv that I built has brought me in afterwards to check it. Then I can't say, I can say it was built properly. I can't say it was maintained properly. And the overwhelming majority of problems happen with the maintenance. Okay, so therefore, it is an issue over time. The next issue, which we have, with good asik, it's an interrupted good asik. And this happens very often also on poles. You have here some electric box, right? Electric box which comes in the middle. So what happens to your good asik there? So if you take a look at Mishnah Berurah here, Mishnah Berurah says in the last Marei Mekomos on page 1, he says in the second last line, he says, well, actually the third last. Im yesh gag shemafsi ben gova chevel la'konim shelamarta lo v'tzuras ha'pesa b'zeh. Ke'em shagag mafsik ben chevel la'konim. Ve'en osim tzuras pesa b'inyan zeh. And so she patach nekev gadol bagag. That's a big hole in the roof. L'mala neged ha'kanim b'inyan shiu ha'kanim b'chubanim kachas ha'chevel b'li hefsek. So in order for this to work, you would actually have to have a hole in the electric box. Otherwise, your good asik stops. Now, the question is what the shiur is to stop a good asik. Because good asik could be that it's only for tfachim. Because for tfachim is the shiur of a ceiling, a roof. So maybe that's the only thing which is mafsik, maybe less is not mafsik. But then you get to another question, which is the question of pischei shimoyim. Pischei shimoyim is a problem when you have don't have a straight doorpost. You have the zigzagging doorpost because it was never finished properly. And therefore you have a stone sticking out, a stone sticking in. That's a problem. Pischei shimoyim is a problem. You can't make a Pesach on pischei shimoyim. So the question is, at what point, and this is the question of b'shikol das, for the person who's putting up the Eruv, at what point is considered to be a small enough box and not pischei shimoyim in order that it's considered to be kosher. But usually it's possible to, like Mishnah Berurah says, you can put it there's a hole. So a lot of times the box is out in a bracket. And in a good Eruv, which a lot of them put up there are good Eruvin, you put the wire all the way up to you put the pole all the way up to the wire. You don't align good asik. So then you can go behind the box. The box is out front, and you put it behind, and you put it underneath the. You can go all the way up to the wire. That's okay. But again, that's something which a person has to be checked that that there's no boxes which are put on, because, like for example, in my street, I guess because people have a snogness to having a cell phone tower, so now they put like mini cell phone towers on top of electric poles, and they put boxes on them, which I guess have the controls or the meters or whatever. So you have to make sure that this box does not come between your good asik and the Eruv itself. Okay, let's go to page 2. Any questions so far? Yes?
The pole that goes all the way up to the wire. That can be at an angle?
Yes, because you're not relying on good asik.
But it's not, is there a shiur at which point?
The shear is not, it can't be within 22 degrees of the ground, because that's not considered to be, it has to be the shear of telem mislakit. Telem mislakit, so it can't be within 22 degrees of the ground. So that's more than 22 degrees off the ground, which is very easy. So that's still considered to be a legitimate wall.
The other, Minat Sad, so Robert in Toronto, Tarom Manim also dealt with Minat Sad, right?
Yes, many, it's I don't want to sound like a racist, but the Polish came up with very interesting innovations for Eruvin. So I guess it's more Shas Achak. So the lift box are pretty machmir in Eruvin. The Polish have innovations.
They relied on what they call hydroelectric.
Yeah. And then Rabbi, what's his name? Rabbi Price afterwards took it over. Yeah. And that's not the Eruv they used today.
Miller.
What?
Miller was the one that...
No, but right. That's between between Rabbi Grabar and Rabbi Miller. There was Rabbi Price. Yeah.
Wait, Rabbi Miller was stricter. He was.
Rabbi Miller's super strict.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I could have guessed this.
Yeah.
Is
Baruch
that,
Hashem.
We lost the access to the hospital.
What?
We lost access to
I don't know the details.
Does that pole out the curvy is allowed to go around, let's say, the electric box if it's going directly, or?
So it can't come kind of at an angle. What we do very often, let's say, it's a good question. What we do very often, if you have the wires out on a bracket. So sometimes you have a bracket out like this, and the wire goes like this, right? It's out there. So what we do is we cantilever a pole. So it's not at a sharp angle. Sharp angle, you can't have like a perpendicular angle, but you have a slightly, to angle it out, that you can do. So you can angle around the box, yeah.
To have it sideways the other way, let's wavy. Like, let's say it goes up, but it goes sideways.
You can do that also, as long as it's continuous and it doesn't have a sharp bend, right? In other words, this is no good. This we know is no good. where you have one thing like this and another thing like that. That's no good. So as long as it's not like that, you're okay. Okay? What? It's position more, yeah. Okay, so then moving on to page 2, the next issue, is the legend behind a fence. And sometimes, we try to avoid this, of course, but sometimes your area goes across private property. Sometimes that's the way it goes with the mercy of the electric lines, and they go in the backyard, so you have to go through the backyard. So the question is, what happens with the Eruv within a fence, in a fenced-off area? So we have a principle that by a house, basically command the Maliyadamya, right? If a house is like a solid block, it's a fascinating Rashi. If you've ever seen Rashi in basic command the Maliyadamya, it says because it's dark and humid inside. And so he says it's like a solid block. So anytime you have mechitzas which go up, so they seem that they cut off not because of basic command of Malidama, because they were seen to cut off the Tzuras HaPesach, right? So how do you have a Tzuras HaPesach when you go over a fence? So what you can do is you can put a lechi on each side of the fence. So you have a Tzuras HaPesach up to the fence, and Tzuras HaPesach after the fence. What happens if you can't do that, and you have a Tzuras HaPesach inside a fence? So the Mishnah Berurah here is quite clear. It says, "Im hemen kind of took a bias. Oh, but so goder mukam arur chusav lav kumu. Afim kana echad hamid sham. Even you put a pole inside there, gankin lamahani." Now, so the question is, what we do in these circumstances? So obviously, it's best to be machmir. The Avnei Nezer, and I discussed it at length in the Sefer, but I'm not going to get into now because it takes too long. The Avnei Nezer has a heter, which people sometimes rely on, which is as long as the pole which you're using goes 10 tefachim above the fence. In other words, the fence ends at a certain level, and then the pole goes higher than that. So then it's okay. So then it's okay. You can use that. You can use that pole. So that sometimes that's necessary, and a lot of Eruvin are built on the basis of B'diavad. Now I say it's actually every Eruv is B'diavad. The question is how much of B'diavad you have. Obviously, if you were Machmir, like Chatchila, you'd Machmir like the Rambam, and the Rambam holds in the Eruv you have to have either a pole every 10 amos or Omei Mubel parts. If you own parts, you can have a pole more than every 10 amos. So you don't have Omei Mubel parts, you have to have a pole every 10 amos, not more. So of course, the Chatchila we'd be Machmir like the Rambam if we could. But every Eruv is built on a B'diavad. Again, even the issue is just a rabbi. Right? Sometimes we have Heterim. But the Chatchila, we would be Machmir, like the Shita, which says that any street which is 160 amos wide, which is almost every street you have, is just Rabbi D'Oraisa. So the question is how much of a B'diavad we need to come on to, and how much should we ever willing to tolerate in an Eruv. And obviously, Am Yisrael has certain minhagim which has become standard over time. It's Puchazim Amad Var, is a big thing by Eruvin. If people have accepted a certain legitimate kula over time, so then we assume that it's considered to be a standard practice. And what this issue is one of the issues in which people try to be machmir. If there's no choice, people rely on the Avnei Nezer, and they put a pole as long as the pole within the wall fence is more than 10 tefachim above the level of the fence. The next issue, which is a bad issue which almost every Eruv has, is the issue of wires and wind. So the Chazon Ish holds that all Eruv wires, the Konal Gabeim, have to go direct from pole to pole. They cannot even sag. If they sag, they're possible. Well, if you look at any cable or electric wire, which is usually what we use nowadays, they all sag. So not every Eruv in a kosher according to Chazon Ish, because they all sag at least a little bit. Not only that, he holds the wind can't sway it from straight, which is a problem because now with cables and wires, they're pretty strong, but pretty heavy. But if you have other kinds of wires you're using, very often if you have a wind, so then the wind blows the wire from side to side. And it's not going directly straight from lechi, from post to post. So what do we rely in that case? So we rely on the Aruch HaShulchan. And let me say about going back to the idea of all Eruvin being B'diavad, assuming that we are Mekel in the Rishus HaRabim issue, which then there's a lot of Mokel to be Mekel, obviously, and Klal Yisrael has been Mekel since the time of Rishonim, if not earlier. So there, every Erev then becomes to the Rabbanan. And we have this beautiful principle by the Rabbanans, which is Savi Rabbanan L'Kula, right? That means that you can, if you have a Machlekes HaPoskim, and there are poskim of stature on both sides of the Machlekes, you can choose to rely on the one which is Mekom. So here the Aruch HaShulchan says, Kosar Mordechai B'Perek Aleph, the Tzuras HaPesach, Stagi B'Konei Gabov. It's enough to have a Konei on top, V'achlo Yeh Nital B'Ruach. So the question, what does Nital mean? How would you translate Nital? What? Removed. So it says, so that's what the Aruch HaShulchan says. You could translate Nital as, it doesn't sway. But he says, no, that's not the pshat. He says, Lokas Avshlo is not made Baruch. It doesn't say it shouldn't sway in the wind. This ain't have shar, it's not possible. Came with Udak Uvegova, since it's thin, it's very high up. So the wind's going to sway a little bit. It's not like a wall which is made from tree branches, which we know sways very much. They're not stable at all. But here, it doesn't sway very much. And it stays in place since it's tied on both sides. You shouldn't fall altogether in the ruach. That's ain't a mechitza. I feel it main ruach even if there is no wind. If you don't have l'chayim out of wood, you can make the l'chayim out of string. You actually take the Erev string and make a 90-degree angle, and then have it be your lechi, right? And a lot of Eruvin, they use for l'chayim, they use caulking. They put it on a wall. They put caulking on a wall, or in the Toronto Erev, they use reflective tape. The halacha is a lechi has to be strong enough to hold a delesh shel kash, to hold a straw door. But it doesn't have to be strong enough by itself, because every doorpost we have is attached to a house. And therefore, as long as it's strong enough when it's attached to the structure next to it, to hold up a delesh shel kash, that's okay. So therefore, the chayan could be just this ropes. Obviously, it has to be connected, he says, with nails. Otherwise, it's going to sway a lot. So the Aruch HaShulchan seems to say that as long as it's not completely removed, even though it sways a little bit, that's okay. Because that's the derech of any type of wire you use. Now, the Chazon Ish holds, don't use a wire. So the pesach can be something strong, like the lintel of a door. But obviously, the overwhelming majority of Eruvin rely, at least implicitly, on this Aruch HaShulchan. But like I said today, when they use the cable television. People think there's no good thing about television. They use the cable television wire. There's a famous story about the Brisker Rav. Brisker Rav said that the Vladivostok, the Trans-Siberian Railway was made so the Marei Yeshiva Bachram could escape during World War II. So cable television wire wasn't made for television, it was made to make Eruvin. And the reason why I use the cable television wire is because it's the lowest one on the pole usually, and it's also that you won't get electrocuted if you deal with it. If you deal with the higher power wires, it's much more dangerous. So have to say that cable television wires do have the smile is that they don't sway. They're very heavy. But they do sag a bit. And in the Sefer I write that I think, that obviously it's a big issue, and it's not discussed anywhere explicitly in Gemara, and that's something which since everybody here is an adult, more or less, so you might have noticed over time that very few of our actual practical halachas come from the Gemara. Usually they develop over time. Like if you learn Masechus Ketuvos, you have no idea how to write a Ketuvah. If you learn Masechus Gittin, you have no idea how to write a get. If you learn Masechus Brachos, maybe you know some of the brachos. So a lot of the halacha develops over time in the Rishonim and the Achronim. So especially in Eruvin, that's why so many things are shikul adas, because they don't come directly from the Gemara. They're developed over time. So the Tzvi place that Frank says, and I think what he says is logical, that as long as the Karnat Gabein doesn't sit within 10 tefachim of the ground, it's still a Pesach. It can sag as long as it doesn't sag till 10 tefachim within the ground. Okay, the next issue, the Imre Yosher. Yes.
It's not a question of how much it departs from the horizontal. How much?
It's only, I'm not talking about, now the horizontal's next. Now I was just talking about vertical.
What are you saying?
Vertical can go within 10 feet from the ground.
But you're saying the sag, like the
Sag.
The sag, is- right, I see what you're saying.
But we're talking about the left.
Talking about how
The wire in the middle.
Yeah.
If it sags, but it's not 10 feet within the front end, so it's more 10 feet from the ground, it can still be considered Pesach.
That's what I'm saying. We don't care how far that sag departs from the true horizontal between point to point.
The horizontal, no, we do. That's the next issue.
The tangent of it.
Let's look at the next issue. Tell me that's what you're referring to,
is this an
okay?
issue of Jewish Pesach, meaning that you need at least 10 tvachim to be considered a Pesach,
Yeah.
or is this an issue of
No, right. You need 10 feet to be considered Pesach.
being out of plumb?
Yeah. Okay, next issue is the Imre Yosher. Imre Yosher is Ramei Arik. And Ramei Arik was one of the great Galiciana Poiskim. So it's something which is discussed by other Poiskim as well. And something which is a matter of controversy till today, which is, does the, again, coming back to what the election company does, so very often you'll have a sequence of polls. And you have here, this here goes over the top, here goes over the top, and here there's a crossbar. And it goes over the side. So it goes like this. Does everybody understand what I just drew? Okay, there's a cross, in the middle, you go over the top, and the middle goes off on a crossbar. Now, the question is that it's a Pesach? Between here and here, even though in the middle it went sideways. Okay, so let's see the Imre Yosher. He says, Kopanim, משושל בתוך 3 טווחים למטה, או מן הצד. So he gives you 3 tvachim of a sag. But he says not just down, up and down, but even sideways. The Amina Lavud, that you say Lavud, change the kosher ha-drot. The drot is the string. A Russia Mudim near the mutter. And then I photocopy the separate part of it. He says, Omnam b'telegraphin shakopanim ha-drot al-gabi agvim, even by the telegraph, where those wires on top of those what are they, resistors, capacitors, after agvim min outside, even though they're on the side, should be going to go to Torah's Ches. I told you before about the Torah's Ches is out mitzad the hakel, al pi Rabbeinu Tam Sefer Yosher, Chai Gavna. Sorry, this guy in the original. Okay, Chai Gavna lo have me hatzad, Gavi kon akum yacham, but she'en lismoch hazeh. Even though you can't rely on the Torah's Ches. We don't rely on him. Come, nidan shimshach al gabi amudim. When it comes on top of the top in 2 places, katzasa go down to Taras Yisrael now. The zeh hakopani daso zeh yesh lo hakel. And he goes on and says it's that Lamaisa you can remake on this case. Now, as I wrote in my sefer, so this is not the way we were taught in the yeshiva to understand lavud. Lavud means that he's saying that as long as the wire is within lavud of straight, it's considered to be a straight. And the way we are told lavud, and in my sefer, I like a good yeshiva bacher, I quoted from the Emet Bracha, who was the one who stands the yeshiva shalom the shesvarim and or Chaim to the Pomeranchik. He says that the lavud connects A to B. You don't say lavud la'avir. You don't say lavud to reposition something which is in the wrong place. You say lavud in order to connect to this pole to that pole when there was in 3 tvachim. Nowhere do we find in Chazal that we use lavud to say, well, that which is positioned here is really positioned there. And therefore, something I'm very machmir on, but other people rely on the Imre Yosher. A lot of big rabbanim rely on the Imre Yosher. I don't understand why. Because again, I don't think that's how lavud works. But according to Imre Yosher, so you can have a horizontal, I think that's what you're asking before, you can have a horizontal deviation of up to 3 tvachim. Rabbi Heinemann, I believe, gives a shiur 15 degrees. I think, Rabbi Heinemann figured out 3 tvachim off of this center. Somehow, I don't remember how he comes up with that. It's 15 degrees, but basically that's based on this 3 tvachim shiur. I don't allow this when I build Eruvin. I don't understand I don't understand the logic of it. If you understand the logic, Tavol and Bracha. But to me, this is not how lavud works. You can't say lavud to reposition a wire which is out of whack. A lot of Eruvin do rely on it. Yes.
I've seen those crossbars, they look like they're more than 2 feet wide, so it's not 3 tefachim anymore.
Well, it depends where it is on the crossbar.
Okay.
So obviously they're sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work.
Okay.
But again, in that case I don't rely on it. I make people put up their own wires in that case and not rely on the wire over the top.
I wasn't asking that.
Okay, so what were you asking?
If the sag, without the sag, the wire would go from point to point in a straight line, parallel to the ground, right? In a straight, right?
It goes parallel anyway.
No, he's saying that if you look at the 2 poles,
It's a
There's a
geometric line.
sag.
It's supposed to be a geometric line from point to point.
Yeah.
Right, now, if from point to point, instead of geometric line, it's in a downward arc, how much can that downward arc depart from the true horizontal?
So he says 3 tvachim. He says 3 tvachim, but presumably in the middle it can't be more than 3 tvachim. I think it can go down even further as long as it's more than 10 tvachim off the ground.
So you don't care how far it sags?
No, because that's a Pesach. A Pesach is if you have a 10 tefach high opening, which has two sides and a top.
With the Kvaneh not being
I don't think so.
truly straight.
Again, the Chazon Ish says differently, and he says differently, but the T Pesach Frank to me makes a lot of sense.
Even if it's mislaked more than 10 tvachim in Daled Amos?
It's still well. You mean
It's
if
enough of a din of a wall, but it still could be it could still
right? But if anything, then you would say that the Pesach starts lower. In other words, if such a severe angle, but I guess what you're saying is that if it's more than 3 tvachim away from the side post, and the angle, yeah, it could be that would be a problem. That usually doesn't happen, but it could be that would be a problem. If it's that severe an angle, that's going to be more within 22 degrees of the side post, you're right. That would be an issue. I agree. Okay, so
Just a more basic question. If one pole is higher and the Eruv is slanted, let's say you're on a hill.
yeah, so Rabbi Heinemann, a lot of them, Sorah and Eruvin nowadays, comes from what Rabbi Heinemann claims to have asked for Boruch Kollel. And so I obviously he went once with a whole bunch of questions to Rabbi Kollel, and Rabbi answered them. And then the way it works is that these things become the term Moshe Sinai. So nobody knows exactly why. But Rabbi Kollel said that it's up to 45 degrees angle. In other words, if this pole the pole is here, there's another pole up the mountain. Up to 45 degree angle is okay.
And wouldn't the sag?
I know why.
If the sag is more than 45 degrees, wouldn't that also be a? I mean, what he was saying, if the sag's more than 45.
Well, we don't know where the 45 degrees comes from. But if you have a sag, so then the sag presumably is still in a straight line between lechi and lechi.
But it's a curve, it's not, like you said, it's not a sharp angle, it's a curve. So
Right.
it's not exactly 45, it's never 45. If it's a curve.
It's never 45.
Yeah, I mean, unless, yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause it's
So,
always a curve.
I don't think this is the idea is that this idea is a different idea than a sag, because let's talk about how would you make a door post, a door on your house, right? So the assumption I guess Rabbi Aaron had is that you're not going to make a lintel on top, which is more than 45 degree angle. So that is based on that. So he said that the top post can be up to 45 degrees off. But again, it's a matter of shikul hadas. I've never seen 45 degrees. It's very dramatic angle. Okay,
Going up a steep incline in the
it's possible.
topography.
Yeah, it's possible.
No, but according to this, 45 degrees is arbitrarily the limit, and the avenue happens to really be steep at that.
Yeah, but no street is 45 degrees high. In other words, yes, you can have it on a mountainside. But you're never going to have it on a street, because you couldn't use a street which is 45 degree angle. The cars would slip down.
I like to speak wrong.
So that'd be a mountain in a rural situation, a camp, whatever.
Yeah, it could be. Yes, that's why you have to be careful about it. You would have to be careful.
Do you agree with that?
With Rabbi?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's become a standard. In other words, like I said before, there's certain things which become accepted, and I don't know how they become accepted. Once they become accepted, we have put some puchas and Muhammad Bar. So yes, I rely on it.
Do you think it should be less?
I think it should be less. Yeah, I think it should be. I think it probably should be less. It's probably the shiur of Talib Mislaki, which is 22 degrees, half of that. But this has become the standard. Let's do the next thing, which is the Chazon Ish on page 3. Chazon Ish by the intersecting Turas Pesach. So you have this occasionally mostly when you switch from a fence to a pest to a wire, which is that let's say here's a fence, and it can be closed by or not. Let's close it for now. And you have a Tzurasa Pesach like this, which goes across the top of the fence. So it comes back to our question from before, right? It's no good. This is also true by intersecting Tzurasa Pesach. In other words, if you want Tzurasa Pesach going this way, and another going this way, and another going this way, and another going this way, so that is a Apostle Eruv. Because the fact that you have four sides doesn't work. They have to actually meet together. Okay, so people very often ask why, in order to check an Eruv, why don't we just run electrical current through the wires and make sure that the current runs, and then before we know we have a complete circuit. So there are obviously many reasons why that doesn't work, but in this case it would, because here you need to have a complete circuit, and here you will not have a complete circuit. You have four separate circuits. So this is a case where, so he says again, and this is a problem when people don't notice it. This is an important thing to understand, that you need an eye for Eruvin. And this is not really directly related to our topic here, because it's talking about the wires, but very often you have to build an Eruvin on two levels, sometimes even three levels, because you have sometimes you have a bridge, where you have one opening on one level, then you have the road, and then you have an opening under the bridge for a river to go by. So then you have to make sure to build the Eruv on two separate levels. Otherwise you're going to have a pirza on the bottom. And this something similar happened once I went to look at Eruv, and the Rav is very proud of the Eruv. He built the Eruv himself, and there was an elevated highway which went from one side of the Eruv to the other side of the Eruv. So you think, okay, I don't have a problem with this because my Eruv is below it. But inside the Eruv, there was a ramp which came down to ground level, and the ramp is porous to the highway, to the Rosh Hashanah. So you can't have a ramp coming off a highway, even though the highway is higher or lower to your ground level inside. And people don't notice this. It happened once in a different area I was involved with, that a bunch of people went through the Eruv, and nobody noticed that there was an abandoned railroad bridge in the middle of the Eruv, but which was porous into the Eruv, right? Because it didn't even hit a street, right? It went down to ground level somewhere beyond the street, and that railroad bridge went out to beyond the Eruv. So I felt really bad for this Rav, because that Eruv was up for 15 years, and it was possible for 15 years, and it was not easy to fix. What?
My father says like the railroad, like Jersey Transit's railroad, like the embankment that's close to it, down the street. My father says that's not in the Eruv either.
Well, I know the Eruv does cross the railroad in some places.
Or there's also the tunnel that goes underneath Passaic Station. I don't know. Is that in the Eruv?
If it's completely within the Eruv, it's not a problem. If it's at the boundary of the Eruv, then that's when it becomes a problem.
Says that's not in the Eruv.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the reality.
I thought
But let's take a second. So I called the Passaic Hills Eruvin, because he would have to clear. I don't know he would have to clear the Eruv Passaic that Shabbos, because the Eruv was never kosher to begin with. So I tried to find a cooler for. I said I can't find a cooler, but let's go Rabbi so and so. So Rabbi so and so said, that doesn't matter who it was, but he said no, he has to clear the Eruv Passaic. It's possible from day one. So it's always good to have another set of eyes on here to make sure you don't miss things like that, even if you're a big Rav. Second, and so I don't know if this maybe Nisayon or not, or maybe Nisayon. Which means, yeah.
Not only do I feel bad for the Rav, I feel bad for everybody who thought it was kosher.
So the thing is like this. I'm glad you brought that up. So in a case where you have a Rav who says an Eruv is kosher, and the Eruv is possible, so the only person who's going to burn in hell is the Rav. Now, this is a very convenient thing for the community. The Rav, not so much, because the tzibur is misasik. They think they're carrying in a kosher Eruv, right? And the halacha in misasik is potter, right? In other words, if you think you're doing something which is mutter, even though it turns out to be osur, you're potter, you're not chayav. So you don't bring a korban. So therefore, you must have, there's another svara also which is brought down in this regard, which is that the Sivas who says by shogig in the Rabbanan you don't require kapara. So he says, so Rav Hershel Shechter, he says that he says he doesn't use the Passaic svara, but he uses the shogig in the Rabbanan. So therefore, if the tzibur carries and they're doing the Rabbanan b'shogig because they don't know the Erev is possible, so also don't require kapara. Now this brings an interesting question to bear, which is why do we in any Issad Rabbanan let's give an OU to Issad Rabbanan and the people won't know and they'll be fine, right? Because it's showing in the Rabbanan. Okay, so they say Misasa B'Chol V'Harayas, but showing in the Rabbanan can't should apply. So obviously there's an issue for a Rav can't do that. But yes, that's why there's a L'maisa, there's a psak in the Yerushalayim here and other places. I think L'maisa this should be the psak everywhere. If an Erev goes down on Shabbos, you don't tell people because you won't be able to get to everybody, and you won't be able to get to everybody on time, and there'll be tremendous problems, and it won't be Passaic. So therefore, you don't tell them. If it's down before Shabbos, we tell them. But if it goes down Shabbos, it's best not to say anything.
Let the rabbis take the brunt of the fault.
Yes, the rabbis take the brunt of it. Yes, for one Shabbos. Yeah.
Why is it Passaic if he thinks he's carrying the line on the Erev?
So he thinks there's an Erev.
Right. So
he thinks there's a kosher Erev. The Rav told us a kosher Erev.
Passaic is he doesn't realize he's doing it all.
No. Passaic is when you think you're doing something mutter. You think you're doing something mutter. No, it's not shogeg. Shogeg is when you don't realize you're doing something wrong. Passaic is when you think you're doing something mutter. Yeah.
Maybe we're speaking about the air going over a bridge, under a bridge. I didn't understand. I want to know if Rebbe could explain that.
Yeah. Let's say you have a road like this. You have a road which goes like this, and you put and this would be the edge of your Erev. That's the edge of your Erev, right? So you put here to a Pesach on the side of the road. This is the side of the road. Now, what people don't realize is that, let's say, you have to look underneath the road too, because sometimes what's underneath the road is there's a opening for the water to go through, a river, a creek. Now, in this case, you need an Erev on two levels. Right, you need an Erev here for the street, and you need an Erev down below for the creek, which is open through porous into the area of the Erev, which is behind this. Okay, so that you have to make sure, always look at how many levels I have. Right, let's say as a case where one case had a train station beneath a roadway. So again, you have to build an Erev on the roadway on top, and on the train stand by the train station below.
Well, what about like the New York City subway?
No, it's beneath ground. That doesn't matter. But the steps are steep enough that it's not going to be considered to be.
I don't know if Manhattan.
Yeah.
Most of Manhattan has an Erev to begin with. So.
Nowadays, most of it have Manhattan. If you hold the Erev Manhattan, most of the Erev Manhattan has an Erev.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Heights.
What? No, they're all over now.
It's the whole thing.
Yes.
I didn't realize there was
All the way
more.
up to
But I don't think Penn Station's within any Erev. Because if there's any which is around the Raisa, which we have as Manazeh, it's Penn Station.
What about
Because
Times
there's
Square?
600,000 people go in and out every day.
What about Times Square?
Why not?
It goes down 6th Avenue. I saw the Erev wire. It literally avoids Times Square and then it goes back.
Okay, but Penn Station I don't think is in the
No,
Erev.
I'm
either.
saying it goes down 6th Avenue and then it goes back.
Okay.
What
They have
about
to take
Times
it down
Square
every year on
Station?
Thanksgiving and put it back.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, this across the 6th
Yeah.
Avenue.
Okay.
Oh, for the Thanksgiving
Parade.
parade?
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
I saw it with my own.
There's two things. The first one is, you were mentioning, the Rebbe was mentioning about not telling people if the air went down the Shabbos, but that sometimes they'll say, there's a storm coming up, so the reliability.
But if they tell people ahead of time, that's okay. Right. You should warn people ahead of time it's going to go down.
Right.
Also, people have to have seichel. By the way, usually snowstorms are not a problem.
Right.
Ice storms are a problem.
Yes, I've heard. The ice, there's ice on the wires. I've heard. Assume the air.
Right. If ice on the wires, they can cable again, not cable television wires, but any other wire can snag and snap under ice.
And the other question is, my family actually does this. That some people just don't use an Erev anywhere. What is that? Where would that go?
Ashreim v'tov lahem, because they're not getting into all these questions which we have here, right? That's I tell people. I tell people, you can carry in this Eruv, I can't. Because the problem is, they can rely on the Rav. I know that a lot of the Rabbanim don't know. But they don't know that. So they can assume the Rav was the same Rav who paskins their silence and other things, tells them the Eruv is kosher, fine. Unfortunately, I have too much experience. But now you guys, this problem might be stuck too, because I told you this. But, take that with your local Orthodox rabbi.
The sheep said Bayer, my family doesn't hold.
I have no idea what it's
because, no, because Avenue U apparently is I've heard it's a 90-degree angle directly onto Ocean Park, which I've heard is a Rishas Harab and Daraisa.
I don't think Ocean Parkway is not necessarily just from the Raisa. It can be, but it's not traveled as much. It's not. There's not as many cars as you think on Ocean Parkway. By the way, once I topic was Shus Rabin, which is not today's topic, but I once, as I bring down the sefer, I once asked the Tzitz Eliezer. One time I met the Tzitz Eliezer. I asked him how they include the Yerushalayim Tel Aviv Eruv within the Yerushalayim Tel Aviv Highway within the Yerushalayim Eruv. The Yerushalayim Eruv goes over the Yerushalayim Tel Aviv Highway, the main Eruv. So he said to me, and this is something which Menashe Klein says, and I thought, again, not to sound racist, but I thought it's like a Hungarian heter, not no Litvak with all of it. He says that people in cars don't count. They have to be walkers. And because it's not like Diglei Midbar. Diglei Midbar, they were walking. So I was taken aback, and I asked you, what? He got upset at me then. Because I got, it's a bit of a nudnik. So there are poskim who, and that's why I say Penn Station is different. Penn Station is just arriving the Mahadran, because people are walking in and out of it. But, so the Ocean Parkway, there are poskim who will tell you don't count cars. If you don't count cars, there are relatively few people on Ocean Parkway.
Wasn't that the main issue with Rav Moshe's psak against the Eruvin?
No, that was the issue with Rav Moshe's issue is a different issue. Rav Moshe's issue is that he holds that he has a chiddush, which is that any area in which 2.4 to 3 million people live has 600,000 people out on the streets all over the area at any given time, and therefore it would be just around the right side, not necessarily in cars, even pedestrians. So that he held that in areas where there's a population 2.4 to 3 million people, you can't put a native. So it's complex shita, but that's a different issue.
Well, New York City has got like 8 million people.
Yeah, but it has to be. It has a whole cheshbon. It has to be 12 mil by 12 mil area. Could be Midbar. It's in the book. Let's take a look.
Midtown Manhattan sounds like it would count like that.
Right?
I think Midtown Manhattan would count.
No, it says Manhattan. No,
It's an island.
It's an island. Yeah.
I would have thought Midtown.
Brooklyn and Queens are far more populated than Manhattan.
Well, yeah, that's
Brooklyn.
well.
Brooklyn is twice as many people, half the
Yeah, it's
size.
more.
Yeah.
It's more of a work
So
area.
it's much more congested.
Yes.
Can you explain, I think, I guess I'll explain again. How do you deal with the fact that there's an on-ramp or off-ramp into the area where the residential?
You have to put a sort of special on the ramp.
At-
That becomes one of the most expensive areas you can build, because the departments of transportation, at least when they put it up in Chicago, required a special breakaway pole. So if a truck hits it, it's not going to. The pole will break, and that costs tens of thousands of dollars. And so, yeah, when you have I don't know if that's true by every highway ramp, but highway ramps are a big problem.
So the air goes around.
Yeah, right here, but 22, but 21. 21 at the bottom of Lafayette, right? They have to. There's a ramp. Obviously, they have to put a wire over the top.
But that's outside.
By the way, it's amazing. Once you know about it, there's a story which Rav Nachum Mendel Kasher brings down. I don't know if it's. He says that that Plato was once walking down the street with his Talmud, and the Talmud, he said to Talmud, "What do you see?" So he says, "I see a horse." So Plato said, "You'll never be a philosopher." When I see a horse, I don't see a horse. I see the concept of a horse. The Hebrew sounds much better. But you just see a horse, you're never going to be a philosopher. So when I walk down the street, I see Eruvin, right? I look at the poles. I don't think I see that the Eruvin kosher. I obviously spot a lot of Eruvin, which otherwise people don't spot. And people get very nervous. What are the people going to see? Say the authorities, if they see this wire, they'll never notice the wire. You can put up a wire. The odds are that you put a wire over 21, and nobody's ever going to notice, unless somebody hits it at some point. Because if you're not looking for it, you don't see it. If you're looking for it, obviously, you see it blatantly. But so that's why a lot of Eruvin, they're not necessarily legal according to the strict letter of the municipal law, but they're still legal in halacha.
21 is
For the
completely.
on-ramp and the off-ramp?
What?
For on-ramps and off-ramps?
Yeah, all ramps.
But 21 is completely out of the Erev, no?
Because there's a wire there.
Right, so
Yeah.
then the ramp.
Yeah, but the
doesn't
ramp
have
is
an issue.
excluded, yes, but every ramp has to be excluded from any, even
Right.
though, from any area, in other words, even if it's depressed or raised highway, the ramps have to be excluded.
Right, that would have been an issue if it was, but
Yeah.
it's not.
Okay, let's go to the next issue, the Makor Chaim. And this is also an issue which is which is very prevalent in Eruvin, and I have a big quandary with it. The issue is like this. You have, it's called the side top wire. By the way, in the book there are lots of nice pictures of all these things. So the side top wire, you have you have a pole, and you have a little connector which comes up off the pole and goes higher than the pole, and then you have a wire going up top of this connector. Right? So the to my mind, this is exactly the same case as this case. Right? Where you have a pole attached to another pole. But Rabbi Heinemann and Rabbi Schechter both are Mekel in this case. They say as long as this thing here is higher, goes higher than the top of the pole, it's considered to be an extension of the pole, even though it's bolted to the side. And they want to say that this comes to this Makor Chaim here, Makor Chaim, which I don't see in the Makor Chaim, but it says only read the mutal l'chaber halechi l'chatichos nesorim haboltim mitzidei haksolin kol she'ein min zeh lezeh shlosh tvachim ad loretz mishum lavu v'av shezeh yotzei v'zeh nichnas. So it's very cryptic what the Makor Chaim is saying. Makor Chaim is the Nesivos, by the way. But I think what the Makor Chaim is saying that you can have if you have a lechi going like this. Well, that's I'm not exaggerating a bit, but you can have different pieces of a lechi and connect it together as long as they're within love with each other. In other words, even that you have it segmented, a segmented lechi is also good lechi. But they want to say that no, this the Makor Chaim is talking about where it's bolted on the side. And therefore, many Eruvin, when I build an Eruv, I have this quandary personally because I really don't like this. But the place can hold it's okay. So usually I'll tell people, if you want an Eruv built like this, I'll build it for you. I'm not happy with it, but I'll build it for you. And usually that's what they want. So it's an issue. Again, it's a shikul adas issue because there's no explicit source. I don't think that's what Makor Chaim is talking about. The Makor Chaim is sort of segmented lechi, not something bolted onto the side of a pole. And therefore they're mad. But many poskim were, which Choshev Rabbanim, were makel on this, and there's no explicit evidence this way or that way. So again, this is an issue where it still has to run directly over the top of this pole, this little extension. It can't run to the side of that extension, but as long as it runs to the top of the extension, there are poskim who are makel on it. Okay.
Does it have to run over the main pole or no?
What?
Does it have to be on top
No.
of the main pole?
It's be no, just have an
If
extension.
it is on top of the main pole, would Rebbe be more makel in
Yes.
that case or no?
Yes, that'd be a good asset for the main pole. Yeah. Anything on top of the main pole would be fine. A couple more issues, relatively quickly. On page 4, the Minchas Yitzchak talks here about doors, and you have very often in an area you have a fence which you incorporate. It's always good to use fences if you can use it. First of all, maybe you'll get the Omen Ruba, which is great. Secondly, it's lower maintenance than wires. But there are gaps in fences. There are doors in fences. So there's a chumah of Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish has a chumah that holds that doors are not good unless they have a source of Pesach as well. Or the door only, which basically means the door doesn't do you any good. Doors are important if you have real Rishus Harabim D'Oraisa, but we have no Rishus Harabim D'Oraisa. Otherwise, we would have a whole problem with the type of doors you put up. If you ever go to Amsterdam Avenue, at the corner of when you come off the Washington Bridge, I don't remember, it was 179th Street or something like that. You'll see. I think I have a picture of it put in the book. That there's a canister there on the side of a light pole, and in that canister there's actually a tarp, and that tarp is meant to be drawn across the street, and that is Delis. In the case Amsterdam Avenue is Rishus Harabim D'Oraisa. So I once was going with a group of students and I tried to vandalize the canister to see if I get the tarp out. Couldn't do it, but that's a Delis is what you need if you have Rishus Harabim D'Oraisa, And some places are there for machmir, like Queens Boulevard, or the other places to have these tarps. But the problem is that you need lots of real noil. You need doors which you can close, and obviously they're not going to let you close this. So they say some places they close it like in the middle of the night on December 25th, when nobody's going from a second or two. But if you really needed doors, these doors wouldn't work. But doors are effective when you don't have a shus harabim. If you don't hold like the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish needed to Pesach anyway, then you have to schar b'efsedo, or you might be chacham b'takonosam. But in a case where but the Minchas Yitzchak here says that most of us don't pass like the Chazon Ish, and the doors do not require Tzursa Pesach. So therefore, Lamaisa, we do rely on, if you have a fence which opens, even if it's always open, right? It doesn't matter. As long as it has doors that can close, it's still considered to be closed. And therefore, in that case, you don't need Tzursa Pesach, you can skip the Tzursa Pesach in that place. So that's, there's a tshuva, and the Tzitz Eliezer, if I recall correctly, in Amsterdam, they were not allowed to put up any wires. But they had a lot of walls. So they wanted to build an Eruv just on the basis of having doors, without any Tzursa Pesach. And Tzitz Eliezer is also Mako, who says you don't have to hold like the Chazon Ish. But they did, what they did, I don't know if this works for the Chazon Ish, is that they made also a rollable Tzursa Pesach. So they can roll the door in and roll the Tzursa Pesach in, which would be on top of the door. I don't think it makes a difference. Which brings into an important point, which is again not directly related, but there's in Eruvin is one of the few areas in which the Chazon Ish shiur becomes a kula, because in the Chazon Ish holds an amma is 2 feet. According to Reb Chaim, it's about 1.5 feet, and you're allowed to have a pirza of up to 10 amos in an Eruv. If more than 10 amos, you need to have a Tzursa Pesach. Less than 10 amos, all you need is two l'chaim, one on each side. So the question is, when you allow a pirza, do you allow a pirza of 10 amos according to the Chazon Ish, which is 20 or 20 feet, or according to Reb Chaim, which is 15 feet? So my perspective is that the Chazon Ish only meant his shiur to be a chumrah, not a kula. He didn't mean to be maker like me, just you have to be machmir like me. But there are Eruvin, there's a certain place in which Kwame built an Eruv, they couldn't put up Tzursa Pesach. And they said, but we have gaps of only 16 feet between walls. We have walls on our subdivision, and we have gaps of 16 feet, so all we should need is 2 l'chayim. So I said, I can't do that, because I hold like Chazon Ish only l'chumrah, not l'kula. So Eruvin is like the Wild West still. They found some who tell that the Chazon Ish also l'kula. Yeah.
So if you were to have a pole every 15 or every 14 feet...
Well, the problem with us, you have the Haggis of Mevatale. You can't have poles in the middle of nowhere. You can't if you have poles, you have to be less than 3 feet between the poles. Right? But you have a fence which ends, and another fence which ends, then you can have a pole on each side. Okay? If specific ending time? It's done for a few minutes. Okay. On the bottom page 4, you have the issue of underpasses for the Chazon Ish. So this is you have you taken. I never looked at it closely, but underpass like the one under the trains here, right? So let's say that was the edge of the Eruv. So does it need a Tzursa Pesach, or is it Tzursa Pesach in and of itself, right? So I think, and this is what Chazon Ish says, that it's not a Tzursa Pesach. Anything, because it's actually it's an opening, but it's an opening which really is a roofed road. It's not a Pesach. It's a road which has a roof. It's a covered road. So that then the Chazon Ish also says that you have to have a Tzursa Pesach independently of the underpass. The fact that you have an underpass in and of itself is not a Tzursa Pesach. So what very often in that case, what you have is that you have a girder. If it's flush like a cement top, so then you have to put up a Tzursa Pesach yourself, and whatever you have to put up, again, you can put caulking on 3 sides, and that's the sides and the top. That would be a Tzursa Pesach. But if you have a girder, then that girder can be your top wire. It's just to put 2 l'chaim under the girder on each side. There's a whole issue with mezuzah, if that should only be chayim mezuzah, because it's avzuke tikra. And so avzuke tikra made to hold up the ceiling is not necessarily an opening for issues of mezuzah. But for Eruvin, it's good enough, and it's considered to be a Pesach, and therefore you can use that girdle on top. One last issue is the issue, again, not directly related, but I think it's important because a lot of Eruvin have this issue, is the Divrei Malkiel and Karpefos. In a suburban Eruv, almost always you'll have an issue of a karpaf. A karpaf is an area which is more than a base to a sign, more than 50 by 100 amos, which is it's not suitable for human use. Human use, according to the Rashi, means even water which is suitable for laundry. But if it's not suitable for laundry, if it's brackish water or muddy water and it's not drinkable, or if you have a very, very thick area of swamp, or even perhaps a forest, where people can't pass, so then that's called a karpaf. It's ein roy l'dira. And you can't have a karpaf within an Eruv. It passes the Eruv. Even if you have an Eruv l'mahadrin around the city, the fact you have a karpaf inside is a problem. Rabbi Shakin actually told me that he had a problem with the pond here in the park, because the pond in the park is very polluted and not suitable for laundry. So he found some way to break up the pond. So the pond is less than the base of the sign in one place.
There's a wire that goes directly down the middle.
Is that what he does? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Just the trees were taken away and it used to go around, but they can't.
so he puts one in there. Okay. So that which is wonderful. But this is a problem which has many Eruvin face, if not all. Any suburban Eruv has this issue of having karpevos in it. So there's a lot of Eruvin line to Divrei Malkiel. This Divrei Malkiel says that that a gina, which is a karpaf, you can't walk there, it's not suitable for human use, even though you're planting there. The plants, like I said, be suitable for human use, you have to be able to walk there. So we planted the garden after you surrounded the chotzer with a wall. And based on this, he says, if you build an Eruv around an area which has a karpaf, and it's okay. Because if the karpaf came after you built an Eruv, then it's mevatel Eruv. But if it's there before you built the Eruv, and you built the Eruv to encompass it, the Eruv is kosher. And his logic, which is difficult to understand, but again, it's a long tshuva, which says he wants to prove in several places that a karpaf undermines an existing enclosure. But enclosure which is superimposed on an area of the karpaf is not a problem. Because by definition, you included it in your hekev l'dira. He still says, and this is a very strange thing, but Divrei Malkiel was a reputable Passaic. He says that you can't, the area which is actually the karpaf, you can't carry it. So let's say you have a farm inside your Eruv, right? But basically, I don't think it's a karpaf. I don't understand why people consider it karpaf. I think Rabbi Hyman considers a cemetery a karpaf. I have no idea why. Can you tell me why?
People don't live there?
So you can walk there.
People live there.
Yeah. Has to be walked there. I was told in Warsaw before the war, if you had a date, you went to the cemetery. Because there's the only green area in Warsaw where you could walk. Very interesting. This is a cemetery. But yeah, you could walk in the cemetery, go take a stroll. I don't understand why the cemetery should be a karpaf. Yeah, I don't understand why. But anyway, this one's surrounded by walls, so I don't think it's such... I don't know. Are they not all surrounded by walls? What? Yeah. So according to Divrei Malkiel, were a cemetery to be a karpaf, if you built an area which included it, you can carry every place, but not in the cemetery. But again, I don't see the cemetery. I think Rehan also holds that golf courses might be karpefos, but again, I don't see why. You can walk through them. Maybe the sand traps are karpefos, but not the golf course, of course.
Does Rebbe rely on this to do no or not?
No. Yes. Let me say this. I will, if I build an Eruv, and I'll write in the letter that this Eruv relies on the Divrei Malkiel. Because, it's like the case like with the side top wire. If they're only posting with a Mako, and it seems that a lot of Eruvin do rely on Divrei Malkiel. So even though if I had my way, I would not include it, but It's interesting because one posting once said to me, I don't want to say his name, and because it's a controversial thing he said to me, but he said he builds an Eruv according to his perceived understanding of the religious level of a community. If a community is making other things, so he'll be making an Eruv. If he's machmir other things, so he's going to be machmir an Eruv. I don't know where he would hope Passaic falls. But that is it's an interesting approach. And so there's a logic to it, right?
And is someone making an Eruv around that so it's like a donut? Is that okay?
Yeah, you can exclude. That's what they do. Place like Muncie where we don't care about zoning laws or anything like that. So there's a place called Lake Suzanne, which is so some people consider carpa privacy because it's dirty water. And I'm sure, without asking anybody, they went to build an Eruv around Lake Suzanne to exclude it from the regular Eruv.
Why not?
Yeah.
Villa Park?
What?
Villa Park?
Villa Park you can walk through. There's no water in one place, which is the base of the sign. That Lake Suzanne seems to be the base of the sign.
Does that turn into summer camp in the summer anyway?
The physical Eruv, is that a separate issue from whatever Rishus is entailed from the Imam Shalom? Or acquiring it, L'Shem,
The physical Eruv is, so the physical Eruv is, I'll tell you something. I have a doctorate in Eruvin. There are very few doctorates in Eruvin. But I have there is in Europe, there's a concept of a PhD by prior publication. And we don't have it in America. And so I went to University of Huddersfield. I said, here, I have a book. It's a prior publication. So I wanted to use it to get a PhD. It's not that easy. It was much harder than I thought it would be. It was very hard. But, so I would not recommend it. But in the end, it worked out. So one of the things they made me do, although they were not supposed to make me do it, turns out it was not appropriate, but they made me write a journal article in a real journal, not the Journal of the Contemporary Society. It had to be like a peer-reviewed journal. So I wrote an article which I included in the Sefer in this edition, which is that because there's an issue, as you probably know, about separation of church and state, where there's a municipality where it can't support, and I'm sure I think it's what you're referring to a certain extent, right? Whether you can build an Eruv without against the municipal authority, without taking account of the municipal authority. Is it a religious thing which the municipal authority can't allow? And my argument is that an Eruv is not really a religious it's not a religious structure. It's a secular structure. It's just that we use. There's a funny cartoon which appeared in some French newspaper in Montreal, in which they showed that the Catholics were using the Eruv wire to hang up their flags for some yontif. So really, an Eruv is just a secular structure. It happens to be that most non-Jews don't have a use for Eruv, but it's not. What makes the Eruv is actually the Eruv Chatzerus. Right, we need to be in an enclosure and make Eruv Chatzerus. Eruv Chatzerus is what makes an Eruv an Eruv. That's why it's called an Eruv. That happens here. Eruv Chatzerus only takes place within a confined area. So if there's a confined area, it doesn't matter whether we have permission, don't have permission. That confined area is defined as a confined area. We can use it. We can make an Eruv inside it. And again, like I say, separated church and state should not be an issue because if some other people want to use the Eruv for some other purpose, they can use it. It's not definitely by definition a religious structure. Does that address your question? No, not really.
It doesn't make a difference. There's such a thing as like Yom Iyun.
No, it's not, because the mice it's there. Again, the structure is there. It doesn't matter. There's no. First of all, question is where it only applies to halachic status, not to something which is a real wall.
Just because it's a violation of local law.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Okay, everybody say thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.